name is Sean Kelley, and I'm a professor at the University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma. It's in a little town called Chickasha, Oklahoma. Probably people are wondering how the heck that is tied in with hockey and so forth. But originally, I grew up in Plymouth, Michigan, which is outside of Detroit there. It's famous now because it has USA Hockey has their national training center there, which is at the rink where the Plymouth Whalers, who have since moved, but used to play there. But of course, when I grew up there was nothing but a field out there. Anyway, so I started playing hockey at a young age in Plymouth, and played hockey all the way up through junior level. Ended up playing junior hockey up in Sault Ste. Marie, not for the major team, but a junior B team up in the Northern Ontario Hockey League. After that, of course, college, and actually I was invited to go play in Sweden, and I think Rami is from Finland there, not too far away, but Sweden, really had a profound effect on me and a lot of my ideas about what I wanted to do with my life and how I looked at hockey and development and so forth, because they were doing a lot of different things than what I got with the North American style. But anyway, so I went to came back and ended up as a golfer too, and played college golf, and went on to graduate school at Ohio State University and taught the hockey classes there, and had a lot of interesting ideas and so forth, I think, that I was trying to put into practice in terms of how I wanted to develop, how I thought athletes should develop and so forth. And that sort of got into this notion of what I called the Kine-Aesthetic Being, which is actually what I completed my PhD dissertation on. Now, today, obviously, we have a very brief presentation, and so trying to put that all together in about 12, 14 minutes here was a real challenge. So I'm probably going to leave a number of things out here. But anyway, so I've been in Oklahoma now for about 20 some years, and still, we're very much involved, or I'm involved in the hockey community here, and it's actually surprisingly a really strong community. We have a number of ex-professional players who live down here from the Central Hockey League minor league teams. Our director played for many years for the New York Islanders and has 3 Stanley Cup rings. And it's, these people are just, people right next to us, and, we see them on a daily basis almost, or when we're at the rink and so forth. But it's almost like now, in Oklahoma, it's like just started and been involved with hockey just as much in Michigan and so forth there as well, which is sort of interesting. So, I've been involved with hockey now for 50 years, and, my ideas and thoughts and so forth have changed dramatically since, my Michigan days. And, and now it's sort of, I've become, we call an aesthetic athlete, right? It's just the enjoyment of playing hockey. Now it's not so much the competitive game that we played, or I played at a younger age. And there's a big shift in my disposition and my outlook and how I approach the game of hockey. And I think that's something that I probably had to do. I would have been burnt out, and, and it's something I really enjoy doing. And maybe I enjoy the game much more now than I ever did in the past, because of that shift and my emphasis. So, and, the other thing I noticed, and I also coach a lot, and I'm a USA level 4 hockey coach. And one of the things I notice a lot of times with the pedagogies for hockey is that there's too much emphasis, just on the drills, and, sometimes we're not too efficient with lining kids up, and, just somebody does the activity, they're watching and waiting and so forth. And there just isn't a lot of creativity. And I think, there's too much emphasis on the competition and so forth. And so kids basically aren't enjoying the game as much as they should. And there's no doubt, in Oklahoma City, we see so many kids start out playing hockey. By the time we get to the 18U, it's hard for us to even field a team. I mean, we're small anyways. And so it's even harder because, we lose kids. And it's just like, well, why are we losing kids to the game? And why aren't people making more of a lifetime commitment to it and playing it? And, again, it's just they don't enjoy it anymore. And, and so some of the reasons why I think are what I'm trying to get at today with my talk here. And so, I think I started thinking a lot about developing players, and I think in many cases we have it wrong, but we are getting better, and that the competitive structures and demands of the game stunt the personal enjoyment and learning that is so crucial to development. Now, last time I was at this conference was in 2014 at Western University in London, Ontario. And when I was there, I discussed the notion of pond hockey, which I played a lot of growing up in Michigan. And I dare say that throughout our history, some of our best players grew up in that environment, free of the constraints of organized hockey, from Gordie Howe on the ponds of Saskatchewan to Wayne Gretzky's flooded backyard. These are environments that allow for creativity and experiential learning that I think is lacking in this development of young players. But with the expansion of the game to southern climates like Oklahoma, the only form of hockey is indoor, is indoor. And so for many kids, that experience is not available. And so, yeah, we have to sort of come up with ways to making the game more of that expression that we have, like in the ponds or in those open environments, and also create practices, and if you will, that allow for some of that creativity, lots of touches and contact or just movement and so forth, and not so much the rigid drills, straight down the line, turn left and go right, go around a cone and come back and get back in the end of the line and so forth, right? We want to be able to, really expand, their practice times and so forth and being out there. So, all right. So what I'm getting at then is that there's an autonomy that certain individuals are able to achieve in hockey that leads to higher levels of being that is exhibited through expression, creativity, and movement. So this concept is what I'm referring to as the Kine-Aesthetic Being. The Kine-Aesthetic Being is a concept I developed, as I mentioned earlier, at Ohio State. And so it's indebted to a lot of the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory, Abraham Maslow's concepts of self-actualization, and also the work of Thomas Hanna, who was a somatic philosopher and wrote a book called Somatics. And, at Ohio State, I was involved with the somatic program with Cy Kleiman. And so that was very influential in a lot of our approaches to practice and so on. So, what is it, or how does the Kine-Aesthetic Being pertain to hockey? The Kine-Aesthetic Being recognizes the importance of physical expression and attempts to develop and refine it. It's not that one need to be exceptional in movement, nor be overly diligent in one's practice, but only that one attempt to cultivate one's physical abilities through a logical plan with a well-defined goal that one practices with consistent moderation. At first, the idea of developing the characteristics or traits of a kinesthetic being would be more aligned with the examination of maybe a professional elite hockey players. But few elite hockey players are probably developed that way. For a lot of them, I heard the session yesterday talking about pain and the macho culture and so forth, the game, and there's a lot of injuries and, it's burnout and so forth. And so I don't think a lot of these professional players probably, are developed in this kinesthetic way. Okay, so when one engages in the kinesthetic, they're doing it for enjoyment, for spiritual, physical, and mental health. Thus, the environment for a kinesthetic being is more likely to be found in the local rinks and the frozen ponds. It is here that the pressure to succeed is less intense. It is hockey for hockey's sake, performing just for the love of performing. From personal experience, I can attest to encountering many middle-aged athletes who played when they were younger, but abandoned sport because it was no longer fun. Only when they returned to sport, free of extreme competition and overzealous coaches, did they truly learn to enjoy playing. Their actions are now driven by the joy of playing, an experience that was quite foreign from early experiences. And unfortunately, for a number of junior hockey players, right, once they aged out of their participation in hockey, once they aged out, the participation in hockey ended because of their either competitive burnout or they failed to see any significant meaning in the game. So another component of the kinesthetic being is, this notion of movement or mastery of movement. Now, it doesn't necessarily require mastery of a great mastery, at least, but you have to have a degree of competency. And I think that's something Csikszentmihalyi really talks about with flow theory. If you're going to achieve sort of these optimal experiences, you have to sort of have a certain level of skill, something you practice and so forth. And hockey's no different, though, as we all know, hockey can be a very difficult game. I once heard a Czech researcher describe hockey as like trying to play tennis while riding a unicycle with someone trying to knock you down, right? And yeah, you got to be able to skate before you can even do any of the other things, right? So yeah, there's a fair amount of competence in the game. Every sport or activity has essential skills that must be developed for one to enjoy the sport with any adequacy. So the question becomes, what, how much skill do we need to have? And perhaps, I think all skill, you have to start with awareness, and awareness of the body, physical awareness. And this is what Thomas Hanna talks a lot about with somatic theory, right? And skill, it's not just skating, like I mentioned earlier, down a straight line or being able to stand and balance and so forth. It starts with just being the understanding and knowing what your body is and how that works. And then, just the kinesthetic sensations, balance, basic locomotor skills, and so forth. Okay, so it is not as much a question whether participants perform a skill with biomechanical perfection, but they perform it with a keen awareness of their bodily movements. And so obviously we need to have a certain skill set to play hockey, and the player must execute these technical components so he or she can skate up and down the ice. But it begins with that somatic awareness of the body, where development, now somatics starts out slow, and it's a very slow way that we develop our skill. And I think sometimes we jump ahead of that when we talk about development. But I think when you do that, development actually occurs in a more efficient way. So in my Tuesday morning hockey league, I play here in Oklahoma City. We have all different backgrounds and ages playing. We have individuals in their 70s playing. And we have, just for an example, we have an elderly gentleman in his 70s who drives 2 hours up from Wichita Falls, Texas to play with us. And I asked him once, why does he do it? Why do you do this? And he replied, it's just pure enjoyment. He loves doing it. He's the most contented player I've ever seen. Each shift is a new experience, and he always has a smile on his face. He also travels the country and plays in several national senior hockey tournaments and travels throughout the country in doing so. He didn't even start playing hockey until his early 60s, his youngster days, right? And so his notion of ultra competitive junior hockey doesn't exist. It's totally foreign. For him, it's just play for the enjoyment of the game and nothing else. And I think there's something about, and he's actually a really good player. He's actually stays up with everybody out there, and you got a number of junior players and so forth that are playing. And so he's able to do that and do it at a very good level. And I think that's an example of this somatic, that enjoyment of the game, and playing very well. Okay, I say I got just a brief minute of time here, so I'll try and finish up. So somatic awareness is not really emphasized in the sports skill development. Okay, so athletes develop external awareness skills before, if ever, internal skills. I can recall experience also when I was in Sweden with an NHL player who was drafted in the first round by Buffalo, and he was out there, obviously very fast player, but we were doing some awareness exercises actually at a school where they blindfolded us, and we had to go over this obstacle course. And of course, the key is just visualize what you're doing and then go over it. Well, when we blindfolded him, he tried to do this. He couldn't do that at all. And I was just amazed that this professional athlete, hockey player couldn't do this. And I was like, well, what's going on here? But he was trained in a way that was very, A to B. He could skate very fast to that point, but he was missing some of that somatic or that awareness dimension of what he was doing. So he was not as well trained proprioceptively in his orientation. Now, he actually ended up playing 15 years in the NHL, and I remember watching him on TV, and he was a great defensive forward, but he didn't score very many goals. And maybe that was some of the reason why. All right, just to finish up here. So a kinesthetic being is able to blend their physical movements with their external environment. Some of you are probably familiar with Malcolm Gladwell and discussing Wayne Gretzky. Okay, what did he say about Wayne Gretzky? He says, what Gretzky perceives on a hockey rink is in a curious way more simple than what a lot less accomplished players perceive. He sees not so much a set of moving players as a number of situations. When he sends a pass to what the rest of us appears as empty space on the ice, and when a teammate magically appears in that space to collect the puck, he has, in reality, simply summed up from his bank account of knowledge the fact that in a particular situation, someone is likely to be in a particular spot, and if he is not there now, he'll be there presently. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into Wayne Gretzky, right? But I think that's an element of some of that somatic awareness and that kinesthetic being. All right, so in conclusion, hockey is a lifetime pursuit, and it can be a sense of tremendous enjoyment if we pursue it the right way. Though I do not pretend to be a pure kinesthetic being reflecting back on almost 50 years of hockey, I've achieved a much greater appreciation of the game as a kid playing midget AA in Michigan. The feeling of getting up early in the morning and skating across the rink without the care in the world is a wonderful experience. Perhaps I've mellowed, but perhaps I've become more enlightened and realized now that hockey is a vehicle that allows me to be a better person, content with who I am. Thank you. Rachel, am I still, we're just going to pass it on to the next person, or Rachel, is she there or not still?
Yeah, I'm there.
Oh, okay.
The next person is Rami, and he's welcome to share his screen whenever you'd like. And is he there? If not, we can skip on down to Bryan, and I can share that.
Yes, I'm here. I was just waiting if Sean gets. By the way, it's very nice paper. I was thinking if you get some questions that
Oh no, we'll save questions for the end. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Perfect. Take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. So here we go. Give us a sec to share the screen, and we're good to go. Okay, are you guys seeing this? My slides?
Yes, we are.
Cool. Okay, so my title is Change on the Fly, Shifting Identities just get that from there. In NHL video gaming culture. And I first talk about my academic background in this conference sort of setting or context of the conference. Well, I'm a lecturer at Digital Culture, Faculty of Humanities, University of Turku, which is located, and our department is located here in Pori. I'm a cultural historian by background, defended my PhD thesis on Monty Python, which is not quite ice hockey, but it can get close if you're not careful with me. I mean, so my research fields are popular culture, of course, were vague or vast topic, media history, and more to be more precise, like films, television, and now video games and so on, and especially recently, NHL video games. And here is, I think, the logo or the opening screen of the first one I played, NHL PA Hockey 93. So that's a long time ago, and that's one of the points I'm going to be sort of pressing here. That is a long time ago, and this series is going on and on and on and on. And why? That's one of the questions. I cannot answer that, but I think I have some answers. Well, change on the fly. We all know what that means because we are ice hockey people. So, so what I'm saying here is that the sort of the identity of the player, video player, is constantly changing on the fly, and that's usually subconscious. It's not like I'm thinking about now myself as as the video player. It's me playing, and I'm playing the Canadians and especially say Kovalchuk. No, it happens without sort of will, and that's one of the sort of important things about video ice hockey, which makes it I think important, or at least a very interesting topic of research, is that the sort of the identification with the actual hockey and the video gaming and everything. And my sort of argument is that these two types of hockey, the real hockey, if you like, played on ice, and then the video game hockey culture, they are getting more and more close to each other. And there are even points where you cannot really tell which one is being talked about or sort of related in a specific situation. Well, here's an interesting quote. It's one of the reasons I started studying this more seriously, was that Kapoko is playing for the Rangers now, but when he was a younger player and he wasn't an NHL player yet, he was playing in the IAEF International World Cup or World Ice Hockey Championships. And he, after the game against the United States, he said that, this is my sort of translation, but I think I got the idea. So it was neat. I have played NHL 19 with him. So it was great to play against him here too. I have been pretty good at them. I don't know if as good as now playing properly, but I have been pretty good at them too. And this was quoted across the press at the time because Kakko was scoring a lot of goals and he was getting a lot of attention. And of course he deserved it. Now, of course, here's Kakko as an NHL 20 virtual person. But I read all the sort of commentary and media reports on this case because it was such an interesting case, because I wasn't sure what he was meaning. And indeed, the media was sort of not so as well, because these were the angles I managed to find from the various reports which were based on that quote or that statement. So has Kakko played against Kane online, like in a video game, and Kane is at home and Kakko is at home in Finland, and they are playing online on the NHL 19? Or has he played against virtual Kane in NHL 19? So as the sort of the player sort of figure which has been created represent Kane, or has he played using the Kane in the video game, and sort of, okay, I was playing with that virtual Kane, and it's exactly like this kind of sort of ambiguity which makes video NHL games an interesting phenomenon in the context of actual hockey. And I was thinking about if you guys know that sort of film, The Swingers, and I was just thinking that could I show you a clip from that, or is there a sort of copywriting, or because it's been recorded and put online, or can I show it? It's just a few minutes, but is it all right? Can you tell me? Because I can leave it out. It's not vital for the presentation. Maybe I'll skip it. So there will be no any problems with someone's copyrighted material, even though it's on YouTube. Let's go forward. Okay, perspectives. I used to play hockey, and one of my old teammates found this wonderful photo, of when we had reunion. This is from the late 1980s, and I think I'm like 17 in that picture. So I just want to make the point, and that's the hair is in the museum with the Torspo gloves and Koho hockey sticks. Anyway, I want to point this out because that's the perspective I have. One perspective is like someone who played ice hockey. I played all through the junior years and then the lower leagues for a moment, and then I'm still playing like recreational hockey with other has-beens, or in my case, never wasies. So I know the game, and of course I'm also a fan. I was a fan of hockey before starting to play, and now I'm an ex-player. But anyway, so there's the media thing, and then there's the playing thing. Of course, I've also, like I said, I've been playing these NHL video games. More to it, of which later, and that's one perspective as well. And of course, as a media scholar, I look at it, how is this, how the games are represented and what aspects are there and so forth. So I started playing this. I was a very lucky guy because they were very expensive, but my friend had one, and it was such an exciting thing. And one of the things was that like in the screenshot, like it's Teemu Selänne, like a local national hero. And he's now in Winnipeg and he's scoring goals. So it's exciting. And that's one of the, as I will point out, one of the reasons why these games are so successful and popular is that they actually, like model these real players there. If you're Bob Essensa fan, you were excited about that screenshot. And so I started playing again. I mean, after 15 years, I mean, just forgot about video games at some point, I suppose. But I just started this research project I'm now doing, and it was very much the same thing. I just went out there, picked my favorite team. I wasn't even thinking about, are they any good in this game? Am I going to be, like, am I going to win or lose or whatever? But it was automatic. It has to be that team. And after learning the basics of the now much more sophisticated and complicated controllers, I was sucked in the game. I was so much in it, and I loved it. I couldn't stop playing. It was like I was like 16 again or something, and I immediately went for the season mode to win the cup. So what happens here is actually it's a video of me. It's a replay of accidental goal. Well, not accidental, but just another goal. And the shifting identity in this video is it's me playing, and I'm playing with Avs, my favorite NHL team. And then I have Mähkä has the puck. He's a brilliant player, and then he passes to Rantanen, my very favorite player, and a local guy from Turku. And I'm going for the backhand. And it actually accidentally goes in, I suppose, because I was going for top corner, but it slips to the 5-hole. And then again, I said, I scored a goal. I scored a nice goal. Not Rantanen, I. And then again, the Avs are, taking the lead. So you can see what's happening here. It's me, the Avs, it's the individual players. So it's a very brief clip. So the Avs are playing. So there's Mähkä, and he's making the pass. I think it's pretty nifty pass. And then Rantanen goes for the goal, and he uses his, like he has a great reach because he's a tall player. He's a great backhander as well. So that's it, and that's me. I mean, I'm a researcher. I'm playing. I'm aware of this sort of identity game or play, which is happening all the time. Now, okay, I'm seeing I'm running out of time shortly, but why is the NHL series so successful? Like from the early 1990s, and still it's annual. There's every year there's a new version. It's not an update you can download. It's actually a new disc, and it costs like, I don't know, $50-$60 maybe, I don't know. In there, in Finland, it's like 50-60 euros. So it's not cheap. But every year you buy the new one. Why? Well, first of all, the games work as video games. Then, of course, the popularity of ice hockey, the real ice hockey, is crucial here because, I think the NHL series is mainly successful commercially in countries which are, like hockey countries, like like Canada, United States, Finland, Sweden, Czech Republic, Russia, so forth. But I think what is the most important little detail is that the actual leagues, like now in the Finnish league and the Swedish league and so forth, the teams and the players, they are all represented in that game. So, okay, did you hear about like this player going to that club? Oh yeah, well, I have to try that on NHL 21 or something. So that's the updating of the actual players, rosters, and the sort of how they sort of, is Chicago doing good or bad or this sort of thing, and identifying with the teams, with the players. That's what makes it so sort of, is still going on so strong. I think that's the key element, the very key element. And I think the EA Sports, the gaming company, realized that, NHL realized that, and the NHL Players Association realized that in the 1990s, because that's the way they sort of joined up, and that's where it started really happening. Because in the earlier versions of the game, it was either the Players Association or the NHL, and they had like sort of all these arguments about should we have fighting and all that. But eventually, all sort of they realized that if they all go together, it's going to be a huge success, which it has been. Now, a couple of sort of points on the research that like research has shown in on virtual sports gaming, that the players apply sports knowledge. They identify the sport in question. There's fantasy element. Okay, I scored the winning goal in Game 7 of Stanley Cup Finals. That's fantasy, isn't it? Competition. It's like like I have to beat this guy. I have to beat a friend. I have to beat that unknown person online. And of course, social aspects as well. So talking about the game, maybe having a like get together and playing and having a couple of beers or something, or just playing online and then chatting like like nice game, man, and also that. And like I said, and eventually in the ice hockey games, the sort of it's about the modeled teams and players in the games, which sort of add to that sort of commitment or loyalty with the series. Now, a brief example of research material. This is from online. Just they are having this retro NHL 1904 tournament. And this guy who won, I think, or something, he's describing the game, how it went. And I highlighted with colors different identities. Well, that's light blue, that's me, that's the player. I'm playing video game here. Okay, I'm playing against Philadelphia Flyers in red. Okay, that's the opposing team in the game, as if they are, but at the same time, it's like the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, again, Insanolord is the opposing video player. So he uses Eric Lindros, okay, a player modeled in the game. Of course, a huge start time and Mark Recchi as well. Bryan leads later on. So you can see that, like one moment it's me, then it's Philly, then it's Lindros, then it's the other video player, and so on. So it's constantly changing. And I don't think the player, even when he was writing that, realized that. He just described the game as he sort of experienced it. And he's experienced it from various viewpoints. Well, and one critical note though, before I get too carried away, of course, if you watch the or play the NHL series, you realize that actually it's more sort of familiar as watching ice hockey on television than actually playing ice hockey on ice. And I think that's very interesting. And like you're playing video ice hockey, or like playing ice hockey, if you know what I mean. If you played hockey for real, and then you play on the, oh, I'm going to pass that guy. At the same time, representation is very much closer to that of watching television. So to conclude, I have several research perspectives here. One of them, the first one is being actually done by one of my students in his master's thesis, like normal people playing video hockey games. And I'm starting with a colleague of mine, have started a study on how actual hockey players, and in his case, my colleagues, soccer players, when they're playing these official sort of NHL and FIFA games, how they feel about them. And it's all about narratives, isn't it? I mean, you cannot, that's the way, how they tell about it, how they tell about the experience. Like, you know, like Kakko said once that he was challenged online that I never play as myself or as the Rangers because they're my club. I never play with my club. So that's very interesting as well. So narratives. And I think so far, my own experience as a player and a scholar and what results my student has gotten and we have gotten, they sort of correlate. It's all about that, you know, like I would never play with that club and I hate that player. And, you know, I think I'm a very good player. I think the Oilers are very good in this game and so forth. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So next, Bryan, I will share your video.
How's the audio? Are you guys able to hear that?
Hi, my name is Bryan McLaughlin.
Is everybody able to hear that?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Excellent, thank you.
Good.
Hi, my name is Bryan McLaughlin. This is my master's thesis. It is called Sent Down, Called Up, Exploring the Roller Coaster of Loans and Reassignments in Professional Hockey. I'd just like to acknowledge my supervisor, Dr. Phil Sullivan, and committee member, Dr. Maureen Connolly. So getting into the literature review on transition. So Schlossberg states that a transition is an event or non-event which results in a change in assumptions about oneself and the world, and thus requires a corresponding change in one's behavior and relationships. So this is applicable to employment, schooling, marriage, as well as transitions such as natural disasters or termination at a job. Now getting into sport career transitions, Bloom stated that talent development occurs across 3 different stages: the initiation stage, where an athlete's introduced to the sport, moving into the developmental stage, where an athlete starts to immerse themselves within the culture, and then moving into the mastery or perfection stage, where an athlete becomes athletically proficient. There's 2 different types of transitions, where a normative transition is anticipated, predictable, and tend to occur when an individual progresses from one stage and enters a new stage. So this could be when we look at Bloom's talent development, where an athlete will go from the initiation stage to the developmental. And then non-normative transition is where it's unanticipated, unpredictable event in an individual's life. And this could be a season-ending injury or deselection from a team. The big difference here is that if the athlete anticipates it or not. When we looked at the transition literature, we broke it into two different categories. So we have the within career transitions, where we looked at entry to elite sport. So Bruner et al. Found that they looked at rookie athletes going into major junior and their experience with that transition. And there's more than just what you see on the ice. There's two themes emerge from on ice and off ice issues. Then there's deselection, where an athlete is deselected from a team. Blakelock et al. Found that deselected athletes experience more mental distress than athletes that are selected, as well as trades, where an athlete is traded from one team to another. McTeer and White found that pitchers and hitters traded mid-season experience a increase in performance, but this fails to look at any sort of qualitative difference between the athletes. Then we also have migration, where recruitment relies on social and individual agencies to find athletes to handle the transition, for handling the psychological norms and the cultural norms of going from, say, one continent to the next. And then we looked at career termination, where voluntary termination, Lally found that athletes that are proactive with their experience with retirement found that they had a more positive experience compared to involuntary termination. Gutbarge et al. Found that athletes that don't plan for career termination experience more mental distress and substance abuse and a form of social exclusion from their former teammates. So the rationale and purpose. So sport career transition literature consists mainly of career termination, as well as then expanded to within career transition, such as entry to elite sport, deselection, trades, and migration. But there are no studies that specifically look at loans and reassignments within professional hockey. And what I mean by that is where an athlete might be playing for an NHL team, and then they are loaned or reassigned to the affiliate within the AHL, the American Hockey League. So the purpose of this study is to explore professional hockey players' lived experiences with loans and reassignments in an organization. So the methodology, we use a constructivist philosophical assumption while engaging in a phenomenological approach. Phenomenology is the meaning of lived experiences for several individuals about a concept or phenomenon. In this case, we are looking at the concept of being called up and sent down. So this allowed the athlete the opportunity to be the expert in the topic, and allowed the researcher to move beyond just brief descriptions toward understanding this specific athletic transition. So the data collection, we looked at 6 male professional hockey players purposely sampled, ranging from 26 to 45 years of age. They each engaged in one individual semi-structured interview, and it was recorded and transcribed verbatim. Sample questions include, please tell me about being sent down, as well as please tell me about how you're feeling after you receive the news you will be loaned to a lower team. So obviously there's limitations to this study. Sample size and gender make it difficult to generalize findings over other athletic populations. And this specific transition makes it difficult to generalize to other sports, such as tennis, that don't have that type of structure. The data analysis, we used a 2-phase process analysis. So phase 1 consisted of within data analysis, where interviews were read for a sense of wholeness, salience, and patterns. And these patterns were placed into a chart to visually see the commonalities across. And then phase 2 consisted of a cross data analysis, cross interview by pattern. So utilizing the patterns that were placed in the chart just made it easier to see the patterns. And then we later clustered into similar groups to better understand the data that was collected. So the discussion, so we have 3 different clusters: performance and well-being. Cluster 1, performance and well-being of an athlete. Cluster 2, external influences on professional career. And cluster 3, interpretation of experiences. So cluster one, first pattern that came up was mindfulness. So this theme helped capture the overall experience of being called up and sent down, as job security is low and uncertainty is high within professional hockey, and the mindful athletes within this sample better understood their environment and were able to function competently. What I mean by that is that they didn't get caught up in thinking about past performances or what's going to happen tomorrow. They were just focused on the practice or the workout session that they had that day. Mental distress appeared with all athletes, as they referred to this, some being more severe than others. Some cases, athletes experience mental distress being called up, regardless of accomplishing their childhood dream of playing in the NHL due to previous experiences with being called up with a certain team. So moving into social support, so emotional support and financial. So every athlete referenced emotional support, whether they were being called up or sent down. So it was often dependent on the situation. But for financial support or financial social support, one athlete expressed the concern about not making enough money to play professional hockey, which is almost paradoxical. As well as the coach-athlete relationship, every athlete referenced this theme, both being positive and negative experiences. Athletes express a lack of transparency with their coaching staff while being called up or sent down, which often creates frustration and ultimately affects the athlete's development, and they don't understand why they were called up or why they were sent down. So one athlete expressed when he was sent down, the coaching staff asked for his opinion on how to create a growth climate within the dressing room. So cluster two, external influences on professional career, the business politics of professional hockey. Every athlete referenced this. And in professional hockey, having optimal performance is not always enough to fulfill a roster spot. And common quotes include, "It's a job here," or "It's a numbers game." And then moving into environmental factors. So this includes the physical environment, so the dressing room, the arena, as well as the living situations. Oftentimes people that might not understand, or they might be an outsider to professional hockey, they don't understand that when an athlete's called up, they're placed in a hotel room, which can create discomfort if an athlete likes to cook their own meals, or have some room to kind of move around during the day. And then role change dependent on the team. So when an athlete is with the AHL team, for example, and they are called up, when they were with the AHL team, they could have been a goal scorer, and now they're trying to fulfill a grinder fighter role at the NHL level. And then when they're sent down, they could go back to a former role. So each athlete expressed some form of happiness when they are sent down. So this highlights when athletes called up, they're placed in unfamiliar situations other than just being on a different team. So cluster three, interpretation of experiences. So metaphors of experiences. Every athlete used metaphors to tell us about their experience. And when an athlete was called up, athletes expressed metaphors such as walking on eggshells or not wanting to step on anyone's toes. And when they're sent down, they use metaphors such as being on an island, or it's kind of felt like I left something on the table there, so to speak, as well as the romanticism of professional hockey. An outsider's perspective on professional hockey tends to be inflated with a luxurious lifestyle, creating precariousness. So what I mean by that is that when you're called up to the NHL level, yes, you might be flying to games and have a personal chef make your meals, but then when you're sent down, you could be on overnight bus trips and you have to bring your own meals. And that might not seem like a lot, but when your body's on the line every night and that determines your job, it makes a big difference. So the implications and conclusions. So it's evident that there are many factors that influence perception of a sport transition for athletes. And this study helped reveal that hockey players are more than just their roles. They're expressive and reflective in intriguing and thoughtful ways, and manage to stress with differing strategies with varying degrees of success. And being called up and sent down are experiences that are more common than glorious success stories that we might see on TSN. Thank you for listening.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for presenting. Now we can get into the question period. Are you all able to hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Feel free to use the chat box below or raise your hand and we can get to you with questions. And you're welcome to turn on your mics as well to ask the questions.
Well, I thought it was a nice contrast there, Bryan, with yours and mine, and talking about professional and some of the issues. But I think you also touched nicely on, some of the things maybe they were finding comfort in getting sent down and how to deal with that in a positive way. So I think that was, there's maybe you were one end of the spectrum, but it was also, I think, tying in there with, maybe just trying to find ways to enjoy the game. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what you touched on with your presentation, the idea of joy and finding joy in playing hockey. One question that kind of rose in my head was the parents, right? Especially at a young age. Yeah. I see a lot in, I'm a hockey instructor here in Toronto, and my nightmare is when I'm running a session and not only am I trying to teach, a youth athlete, but then there's dad at the corner also trying to coach their kid. And it's the kids looking over and they're not listening to me. And then it's like, okay, well, what's my role here? And then I have to talk to the parent. Listen, right now your job is to fulfill the role of being a parent. My role is to be the coach. And, what I see oftentimes is parents are trying to fulfill two different roles, and ultimately it affects the kid. And then over time, you see the kids starting to lose that joy. So that kind of sparked in my head when you were talking about finding that joy later on in life. I think you're going to see that more often. Maybe it's to do with the parents, or maybe it's they don't enjoy it. But that kind of rose in my head.
Yeah. And you're trying to do things out there too that sometimes a little bit different what the parent thinks, right? That you should be doing, right? And it's like, well, okay, we're more of the experts here, and maybe it doesn't look the way you want it to, but yeah, just trust us. Believe me, it's it works. But yeah, so. And actually, I saw Maureen Connolly. She actually would come to the Somatic conferences at Ohio State, so I've met her before. Yeah, she was on your committee there, so there's a little connection there too. Yeah.
Yeah, Maureen's great. She was the reason why I not only finished on time, but she opened up my eyes to phenomenology and the power of somebody's story. Oh. Darren's got a question.
Yeah. Hi, thanks. I've got a question for Sean. Because I teach sports psychology at Acadia University and applied sports psychology, and we spend a fair bit of time looking at task and ego goal orientations, and just the types of goals that athletes strive for, whether it's striving for an outcome in its own right, or striving to be a little bit better at what you're doing, and one is a little bit more internal than the other. And as I listen to the description of the Kine-Aesthetic Being, it seems that at first I kind of linked it to a task orientation where, it's the joy in the process itself, but a task goal orientation is really designed for improvement. And it doesn't sound like that's inherent in the Kine-Aesthetic Being. So is the concept of Kine-Aesthetic Being just finding a joy in what your body is able to do, or in the sensation of the activity, rather than improving per se? And how would this relate to competitiveness in kids? Because can you separate the two?
Yeah, and that's sort of the paradox, right? I mean, that's okay. If we have goal setting and we're trying to achieve a certain goal, okay, so yeah, how do we get there? And of course, I think in sort of maybe the traditional methods and so forth, I think we tend to get caught up on just that objective, right? So skate down to here, or think a certain thing, or whatever that goal might be. And so that's sort of the paradox, because somatics or kinesthetics, right, the focus is, okay, let's be more internal. So instead of being externally focused, let's focus on the proprioceptions, or the feels of somatics, right? Thomas Hanna talks about somatics as being experiencing the body from within. And I think that's what you're sort of that self-processing. And so by focusing on that though, I think you get some of those external goals, right? It starts from there and you focus on that. Let me give an example like skating. Okay. So when we skate, right. And, I'm probably guilty of this too. We have like young kids, right? We might line them up. We would tell them to do certain things, right? We want them to do, focus on maybe extend the stride out, bend the knee, okay, recover and so forth. And then we tell them to go do it. And then boom, they go down and then of course, then it becomes a little bit of a race or whatever. And they tend to lose that focus on just the skill, right? The internal. And so maybe, we should focus on just, okay, don't worry about what anybody else does. We always say that, but of course it always comes in. They all want to be competitive, right? And so that takes it out here instead of being here. So let's focus on just skate down. And maybe they need to do this on the pond, right? And they need to do that out of that environment. And let's just focus on stride, recover, glide. And we're not racing, stride, recover, glide. So I think, I don't know if I'm answering the question that great, but I think if we focus on that internal component, right, and just be aware of what we're doing in a way we get that external component. So.
I think that helps a lot. And I know that when I've been on the ice and doing a little bit of skating instruction, those are exactly your words are exactly what I would be saying. And it's so hard to get players to kind of put blinders on and, just don't worry about whenever everyone else is doing, just focus on, like you're trying to go on your inside edge and, what does that feel like? And can you recreate it? And can you stretch it a little bit? And yeah, I agree. It'd be really nice to be able to have that one player just in isolation so that focus can be there, but it's tough.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah. So I think just a lot of just on their own and doing that's, like Wayne Gretzky in his backyard, he could do that. Didn't have to worry about what other people thought or did whatever. So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Bryan, I'm trying to type a question and I'll just ask it because it looks like we're running out of time. So I'm wondering if there's a way of marrying Sean's idea of the Kine-Aesthetic body with Rami's idea of the identity one gains through video games, but by changing the notion of identity to Kine-Aesthetic identity. And if we could see a video game player as experiencing the game in his or her whole body, could that then have implications for a therapeutic environment where, say, a player has lost his or her ability to move, walk, or whatever? Could that person somehow experience a sort of healing by playing the video game and inhabiting the identity of that unhurt, uninjured player? I hope that's not too convoluted.
Thank you, Bryan. That's a huge concept, I think, and certainly there's something there's so much to think about. But actually, I got a question from a person who had to leave, and he wrote it to me and actually touches upon this territory because what he asked was that I'm wondering whether you think the video games count as sport, and if so, do you think in the case of ice hockey is it the same sport? And well, it was interesting because I was just I had a talk from a general manager of a professional esports company, and one of the games, of course, they have the Counter-Strike and all that, but they also have NHL team, which means that 6 guys are playing, and each one has their own position, just like on like on ice. And and then he was talking about showing the daily schedules for those players because they're professionals, they're getting paid to play video games, and they are like world class. So it was very similar to athletes routine with like physical training, or sort of like recreation, swimming, and decent meals and all that. So of course I was expecting that they actually eat crisps and drink Coca-Cola all night and stay up late, and if they're professionals. But it's very interesting because it's close to being a professional athlete. That's sexual. Of course, it's very different. They don't pump iron as much, I suppose. But there was that aspect, and one of the other students was wondering whether he could find a club or team, junior like ice hockey team, who would use the video game for training, and then another one who doesn't use it. So, and to compare results, how they sort of play the game. Are they more sort of prone to sort of go solo all over the ice or what, or make passes or whatever. So, but there's common ground here. I think all in 3 papers, there's some similar teams involved. But to answer the person's question briefly, it's not the same game. That's pretty obvious. There are similarities, and of course the sort of the idea of playing hockey is similar, but of course it's very much different physically. But and that brings us back to your question, which is a very good question. But but I've noticed that. And actually, one of my mates said when we're playing, and like going to the sauna and having some beers and playing NHL, that every time I'm trying to make a big hit, I always go like this, even though it's just a small flick of the finger, but my body is going with that, like that check. It's so I suppose, but that requires that you actually played the actual game at some point in your life.
Can I just loop Bryan in and ask whether it was considered in your research the person's perception of, let's just say his, if we're talking about the AHL, NHL, does the person's perception of his body change when, for example, he changes roles? So if I go from a scorer to a fighter, what happens in my head with respect to the kinesthetic aspects of my bodily presence?
That wasn't part of the study, like it wasn't a direction, but it is, something to consider for future research, because, you're fulfilling a different role. But the idea when we kind of started to get that theme that started to pop up, it was just to see, okay, what types of roles are you fulfilling and what are the differences? But what I could see, my own like personal perspective, is that if you go from a goal scorer to, say, a more energy person, you're, say, on the third line, you're getting less ice time, you might not be so caught up in the idea of, well, I need the puck. It's just, I need to make an impact, right? So I think your mind starts to shift a bit, and not by a bit, I think quite a bit. So I think that is a large part of it. And getting into that mindset before your game, I think it also has a snowball effect on not only somebody's mindset, but then their pre-game routines, right? How they prepare, because if they're going over confidence building, they might not be talking about their impact on the power play, because now they're going to the third or fourth line. They're not going to see the power play. They might see the penalty kill, but all they want to do is block shots and clear bodies from the front. But that is a good kind of future research to look at, because I think that plays a big role.
I'm just thinking of an example would be Brian Boyle, who was out here in LA and didn't have a great start to his career. I heard him interviewed maybe a year ago, and they said, "What happened? You've stuck now. You're better." And he said, "When I came in from college, I didn't realize that a 6'6" or 6'5" guy or whatever can just skate the other way. That's just not the role." So in other words, someone at some point said to him, grow your game into your body, basically, which I think maybe overlaps with all of your papers, essentially.
Or
and
just be yourself, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Where in the college game, you weren't called upon to be yourself, because you could get away with a non-violent, no fighting sort of way of playing the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
Bryan, Yes, Bob Dawson here. I'm a former hockey player as well as diversity management consultant, and in having heard your presentation, I'd be interested in knowing, with respect to your cluster 1 performance and well-being of an athlete, in terms of mindfulness, social support, emotional support, and coach-athlete experience from a diversity perspective. Was that factored in your studies or reviews to get some sort of sense of how athletes of color are feeling, thinking, and what they're experiencing?
Yeah, so this was because it was my master's thesis and it's kind of like a time crunch, what I wanted to originally do is get a representative sample. And then, it didn't work out that way. I only had one person of color that was within the 6 athletes. And it's not representative of hockey, obviously. But I think what my goal was to have at least 12 and have, a variety of not only people of color, but different backgrounds and different positions, but it just didn't work out that way. But I think you're going to have different perspectives, and the coach athlete relationship is going to be completely different. But I think there's going to be some similarities where, I mean, you can probably attest this too, where transparency with coaching staffs is not, it's not a thing, right? And it's the old school way of coaching was, maybe they're playing mind games with an athlete to get more out of them. But, they're not a psychologist. They don't know what they're really doing. And to get more out of your athlete is not to lie to them. And it's to build that trust, because any sort of behavior change comes from trust first. You don't have trust, and I'm a mental performance consultant, so I know if I don't have trust with my athletes and my athletes don't trust me, I'm not going to make an impact. I'm just going to be talking to them, and it's going to go in one ear, out the other. And I had the same thing when I was playing hockey. I played year junior C and played AA growing up, and I had many bad experiences with coaches, and there was only one coach that made an impact on me, and he wasn't even the head coach. And it was an assistant coach from when I was playing midget, and I'm still in contact with him. And he had the most impact because I trusted him. I trusted what he had to say. Where my, junior C coach, you get a different kind of coach at junior C, and they weren't the greatest, but we won't go into detail about that.